Right?
Yeah, hey, Coach, what's the joker position on offense?
Well, you can play a lot of different spots, from quarterback to wide out to running back to tight end.
We know this joker on defense from the 49ers, first time we saw it on that. That's how.
Well, you just try to find ways to evolve, and we think it works for us.
Hey, Coach, as you get ready here, a lot of folks are anticipating, Kyle had, the comeback from the surgery and so forth. What are some of the things that, he's been able to do and show out there as you get ready to head into the season?
Yeah, he's had a productive camp. There's a lot of things that when you're coming off an injury, the same thing with TQ. Again, as you're trying to build up the entire team up, but, individually, guys, as we're getting ready for week one, unless you played every snap in the preseason, I don't know many people are going to be truly 100% ready for 65 snaps. That's always an end of the game, and there's a fine line there, and there's a lot that goes into week one. But everything we've done to try to build up this point, we feel good about where we're at. And like I said, I think that we've had a productive camp.
I know you talked about the other day going against essentially unscouted looks. Neither team really has a solid idea of what the other looks like. But for you, does it almost excite you in terms of how it could almost be more of a coaching chess match than anything else?
There's always scheme stuff that goes into it, and again, it's going to be about the players and if we're ready to execute and we can play with discipline. And you see a lot of mistakes. You see it every year, early in the season, in the preseason. Can we tackle well? Our fundamentals good. You hold on to the football, not having self-inflicted wounds, critical downs. Those are things that usually happen early on, and you try to make sure you're prepared and ready to roll. But that there's a lot that goes into week one sometimes that we got to make sure we're ready and play smart football. And then, there are going to be things. That's every week. Things come up, and that's what people game plan. And they may have a trick play of the week, and or their special teams. That's been a thing with Hecker, and going back to his history and Tabor. They got something cooked up, and you got to make sure your rules and your discipline snap in and snap out.
Arthur, you have a lot of new bodies on the defensive side of the ball, more so than offense,
Right.
probably. Would it be natural if it takes a little longer for that side of the ball to sort of come together?
Yeah, I think that happens. It's communication. There's so many things that can happen pre-snap, and that's what you try to simulate, and you try to push as hard as you can to make sure that you've stressed them so we can be in the, when it gets down to a critical third down or fourth down, or, they come out with a different look or a shift or something like that we're sound. And certainly, I think in any industry, and especially in a team-oriented sport and in a high-pressure, high-performance business, that communication familiarity certainly helps. But every year there is a lot of turnover now more than ever. And then week in and week out, that's why you want to make sure you're developing so guys are used to the calls, used to being around each other. But that certainly can be a challenge.
Are the communication issues more likely to be on the back end than the front end?
Just depends who you got back there.
I just think because there's more.
Sure, and what and I'm not going to go specifically into our scheme, but what you put on people, everybody's different. There's some teams that are going to put a lot on the center pre-snap. Some teams put on the quarterback. I've been around a great O-line coach that put some stuff on the tackles. They had some veteran tackles. But so it's a little bit different, team to team and based on your personnel or what you're trying to do. Sometimes I think the green dot's overrated because that may not be the guy that's really making the calls. There's teams that have used the D-line to make certain calls, front adjustments or whatnot. So I think it's case by case, team by team. But you certainly anticipate the veterans that have been out there. And that's their job, and they'd be ready to go. That's the expectation with those guys. And Jesse and Caden and Bud, Calais, Grady, guys that have been and played a lot of snaps. David, that's what you're banking on too, is that experience and the work we've put in.
Jeff hasn't obviously been out there much. What's his kind of status now?
Yeah, as we get into there, I think we'll have a couple more guys back today. He's getting close, but he's not going to be out there on the practice field, which is going to make it harder. I wouldn't rule him out quite yet, but he is making a lot of progress and ahead of where I thought he would be. But that's going to be indicated. We'll have the injury report after practice, and you'll be able to see who's out there.
Going back Falcons, I think it was Ryan who's made the comment, even a couple weeks into training camp, that he felt like the group as a whole was gelling together a lot quicker than maybe he anticipated at that point. Would you agree with that, even now that we're in week 1 of the season? Just the camaraderie.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that makes you feel like you've gotten the right guys, and it goes back to from the staff to the players, communication and problem solving. I think the worst thing, the thing people happen is they think that you're just going to reprint, what's worked the year before, or hey, I did it this way at this place. When you have the right staff and you can problem solve and you can adjust, you have your core beliefs, but your scheme where you have the right coaches that can problem solve, and then ultimately a lot of things you may want to do, but it may not fit your personnel. And as you piece it together, a lot of it is fit and chemistry. Some people think it's all played in fantasy football. Go with names that or you've been told or you read by somebody, or somebody's propped up somebody through maybe an agent, and they puffed them up through social media, and they think, oh, this guy's awesome, but it may be a toxic fit. So the big thing is about the chemistry and fit. So we feel good about that, but that's a beautiful thing about football. Until you get in those real stressful environments, as you ramp up, we'll find out more Sunday at 1.
To go back to this joker position, so what room is Cordero?
Depends on the day.
Floating around?
Some days he meets with me, some days he meets with TJ, some days he meets with Mike Petrie, some days he meets with Led, not you, but Wayne Ledford, Marquise, so.
Anything else?
Yeah, Coach, a lot of anticipation for Bijan out there. Just how has he, could you sum up just the onboarding and how he's at the point where you're at him now that people are expecting a lot from him?
Sure, and that's what happens when you take somebody high. There are great expectations. That's when you make those investments. So you got to make sure it's the right person, you got the right plan. So far, so good. Again, just like the question about the communication. Be the first big test, a real stressful environment. He passed them all so far, and he's exactly who I thought he was. And in some ways, he's even more mature than I realized in handling expectations and pressure, because that's not easy. It gets harder and harder, especially, with everything at your fingertips now. I mean, if you live through your screen, it could be a toxic wasteland. And so there's a lot of things to handle on the mental side, and I have to give Bijan a lot of credit. He does a good job handling that stuff, but he's excited. I mean, there'll be nerves like there will be for any rookie or even guys going into their 10th or 16th year.
Arthur, what can you say about the division of responsibilities between Ryan and Jerry on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, so every staff I've been on, Jeff, it's the same thing with game planning. I think sometimes, this is I say this because it's just the business model, but this is a paranoid and insecure business. I think you've heard me say that. So a lot of times, and I don't know the genesis of it, but there's probably been some people that deserve way too much credit. They get in those production meetings and they want the credit when things are going well, and they want the blame shifted when it doesn't. But I think when you have a real staff and real chemistry, it's ultimately somebody's paid to make the call. And it'll be different how you logistically set it up on a play sheet. I think too many people, there's so many frail egos that want to say, this is my offense, this is my defense. It's the Falcons. I'm not going to get quoted with some other line, but it is the Atlanta Falcons defense and Atlanta Falcons offense, especially in our team. So we've got a great staff, and ultimately when you got different ideas and you put it together and you try to problem solve and you come out, this is the direction we're going. And I feel like we've got that in all 3 phases, and that's our job, to set that climate. But it makes me laugh sometimes. You're watching a game and you can tell, in the production meeting, who's patting themselves on the back too much. Play breaks down, nobody's open, quarterback early birds goes 12 steps and throws it behind his head, and guy makes a great play, and they're like, what a play call. And it's like, I don't know what was good about that play call. There's been play calls I've had where you feel like you had them dead to rights, and there's 22 guys out there and there's a guy that tips a ball, and you're like, damn, I mean, you had him and it looks like garbage. And that's the nature of football. But if you have the right people and the right perspective and you're trying to problem solve, you can cut that out. And so been very pleased with the way the defenses worked, very pleased with the way the offenses worked and special teams. So that's what we want. And then ultimately, somebody's got to call it in. But when you've prepped and made adjustments and throughout the week, a lot of that stuff is planned out. And then there's going to be in-game adjustments. And if you've got communication on the staff, it'll go out and work well. But at the end of the day, any play that's called, special teams, offense, defense, that's my responsibility. That's what the head coach is, and that's what I believe. And we work together on that. So that's how we function here.
So all that said, who's ultimately sending the button?
What's that?
All that said, who's ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, Ryan's going to push the button.
Okay.
You know, and it's no different than some offensive staffs have been in. The guys called it, and they have the quarterback coach actually say it. It's a game of communication. What you want is it's all logistics. You know, you got somebody in the box spotting, you got somebody in the box spotting personnel, quick decisions, and, you know, and a lot of it's depending on how you want to put your call sheet together. Hey, here's our calls. Here's what we wanted to hit on third down. Here's what we wanted to hit in the red zone or whatever it is, how you break it up. But, you know, ultimately those things are planned ahead, and then there is a feel to the game, but whether that person directly pushes the button in doesn't mean that's necessarily what's said beforehand. You know, you can direct, like, it's like best example I can have, I've been to a NASCAR race and I've listened to like a pit crew as a spotter going around. You know, and this, to not make light of this because I don't like the example. I love the military history, but I've never make light and compare football to like military, but talking to old men before about calling in airstrikes and the logistics that go into it, there's a lot of communication and trust that has to happen. So it's the same thing, you know, again, whoever's pushed the button, great. But it's really what's going on behind the scenes, the logistics of it. So again, there's been a lot of guys that push the button and the play works, they got their chest up. Play doesn't, they're looking to shift the blame. So that's just not how we operate here, Jeff, and I know you've covered a lot of teams and a lot of different sports. It's just a fundamental belief. We got to have great communication, and ultimately, whoever pushes the button in, or Marquise, you know, makes a call, and I'm ultimately responsible for it. That's the job of the head coach, and we all communicate, and we try to make the best decisions for this team and operate.
Sorry, one last follow-up.
Sure.
The last time Ryan actually had a defensive coordinator title, I think was in college somewhere. I think I heard he maybe called some plays last year with the Saints, maybe with short yards, whatever. I'm just curious how much, when you were talking to him through the interview process, was focused on, okay, you're going to be making play calls now, and
Sure.
in your mind, are you up for this? Because this is a step up.
Absolutely. You know, everybody, you know, that's the next step, you know, they want to make, you know, and there's been coaches that haven't been coordinators that become great head coaches or whatever it may have been, but that's a natural step. If people have goals, there are a lot of guys on our staff that have goals. You hope they have goals. It's our job, hopefully, to win enough where you develop and people naturally poach people from your staff and you develop them. So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And sometimes there's been guys that maybe a retread's not the right decision for you, or where you want, what you want to get, or the culture you want to set in that room. And I will say that, you know, the logistics of calling defense in is a little bit different than offense. But you're looking at emotional intelligence. You know, can you keep your composure on game day? That's another thing that can seem some crazy or heard some crazy things on the headset. You try to keep a command and keep it cool under pressure, you know, and I think Ryan's done a good job of that. And again, if you've got the support behind you, you don't feel like you're on an island. But there's a lot that goes into it, you know, decision making, and you're prepared, you're setting it up, and those things that there's trust, and you got to have belief in that person. No different than Mike Vrabel having trust in me. I mean, it would have been easy to not give a tight end coach the job, but the one thing that why I'm always going to be loyal to Braves is he's a real coach and he's got real leadership characters, because there's going to be some down times in a year. But when you got a guy that you understand that, and there's communication, there's trust, that's how it's going to work, and that's what we're trying to build here.
You've been asked a lot about Desmond this offseason. At this point, just regarding his effectiveness, and what's your confidence level? How confident are you, in his ability to be effective?
We wouldn't put him out there if we weren't confident. Simple as that.
I wanted to circle back to Bijan. You talked about his maturity, and from outside looking in, he seems as advertised not just on the field, but personality-wise, especially for a rookie. You talked about his maturity, but what makes you say that comment of, he's probably more mature than I even gave it credit for? What about his personality shows you that, he's more than as advertised to you?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but until I always say, until you go through a season with somebody or you work with them and you don't really know them, there's people you have acquaintances and you may have a one impression, and you talk to people that have actually worked with them, yeah, he's great to go, have a beer with at, some function, but you get behind and you get in the mix, doesn't handle this well or whatever. And so you spend a lot of time, and our scouts done a hell of a job, and we try to make sure, I think sometimes the easy thing to do is to get the abilities right that we all can see. We can all watch, and we can watch college football. And holy hell, that player's fast. That guy made a hell of a catch. It's the makeup part that you got to get right, and then there's an unknown, and you put them in a new environment, hasn't been in, how they handle it. I say this all the time. There's a lot of negative people want to focus on the new landscape. It is what it is, right? Change is constant. But I think it gave us, he had a joke, and it's the most popular people, maybe that's what you're pandering to, or Matthew McConaughey and Bijan Robinson in Austin, Texas, right? They handle that fame. I think if you handle that fame, and history will tell you that. I mean, you look at different industries of child stars, some of them had some crazy stories. And I just know at 19, 20 years old, when you have that kind of access and celebrity, it can be more of a challenge than when you're, just some, normal college kid, running around at Chapel Hill, when nobody gave a crap. But, everywhere Bijan goes, and today, everybody can video you everywhere. That's a different mindset. And those are things, and just ultimately, I guess the best answer is I just watch his day-to-day habits. And they're so far, so great, so good.
Grace, you were talking before about communications and logistics on a game day. You're going into your third your season head coach. What are some changes that you've made or figured out, from year 1 to year 3 of here's how we do a better way to do things?
Yeah, constantly. That's what sometimes as you try to develop a staff, like I think you try to give people more responsibility. There's so much happens behind the scenes, and there's trust, right? Maybe who's going to break down this section, or who's going to spearhead when we get in there behind the scenes and start game planning. Those are some things that you try to evolve. Who you trust on game day, that's the thing too. You want to make sure you've got the right lines of communication, and you grow together. I mean, that's where you want to continue to develop. You want to keep things fresh, but there is a familiarity that we have, especially on the offensive side, between Dave, myself, Led, TJ, Flats, Mike. That helps. It does. We've been through some things. We've tried some things. Hey, that didn't really work for us. It was a good idea. Hey, let's try to do this. And you have that openness and that problem solving. That certainly helps.